assuming that's good.
Yep.
Thank you guys for your patience
We can hear you.
getting into this thing. Glad to see a lot of some familiar names, some names I've not met, but yeah, we're very excited to be presenting you the Officer Transition Town Hall. My name is Matthew Little. I'm with the Oregon State chapter. I'm one of the two undergraduate counselors. Previously served as Venerable D and Senior Dean for our chapter, as well as a few other things. And this is my senior year, so pretty establishment.
Cool. Yeah. My name is Blake Gamber. I'm the other undergraduate counselor from the Kansas State chapter, current Venerable Dean, going into my senior year as well. So just another semester left. J-
I'm Justin McGrath. I'm from the California chapter, alumni there, refounding father. Currently work for the international headquarters as a chapter coach, chapter consultant. Currently in Carleton, in Ottawa, beautiful Ottawa, Canada. It was raining like crazy today, and happy to be in my hotel room where it's warm. So,
I'm Johnny. I'm also a leadership consultant. I graduated last year. I was a president. I did Rush 2 times. I've been a chapter advisor. And yeah, right now I'm working for headquarters.
Yeah. Well, with that, we're gonna dive right into the topics. So these are the main things we're gonna be covering today in our town hall. If this is your first town hall, basically the idea with these was it was brought up at Conclave, basically just providing us with an opportunity to come together more than, just every 6 months at a summit or a ALA or a conclave and be able to kind of bounce ideas off each other and try to share ideas between chapter on a more frequent basis outside of just our international events. So as we're moving into election season for Acacia and we're starting to look at who's going to be taking the reins for this new year, we want to start thinking about the handoff of responsibilities to the newest officers. So that's why we're bringing this to you guys. Again, appreciate you all being here. I think we have a lot of good content for a lot of chapters, so we're very excited. But yeah, the main things we're going to be covering today, as seen, is officer transitions versus training. They're similar words, but they mean different things, as well as how to organize and execute a successful officer retreat, as well as thinking about how you're structuring your officer organization when the time comes. So with this, when we're transitioning to the new executive board, we want to try to retain as much information as possible, and we want to stop inventing the wheel. For all you football fans, poor transition, in my opinion, is a drive killer. That's your holding penalty. It's it's gonna just set us back. And if we can't do good transitions, our chapters are gonna lose a lot of much needed momentum. So the idea with this is to prepare the next guy to have a better time than you did when you started your time in office. So for everyone who's currently an officer and they're going to be looking to move on to a new position or just retiring from the officer board in this next year, the idea for today is just kind of get some ideas for what your transition should be looking like and what you need to do to prepare in the next month or two to execute a good transition and a good officer retreat. And then for anyone who's a prospective new officer, the idea for you today is just get an idea of what your transition will hopefully look like when you do end up in office, and as well as to start thinking about at a higher level what it means to be a leader in your fraternity and how can you take what's been given to you by the outgoing members and start start the next semester out strong. This presentation is being brought to you by only 4 chapters. The mine's from just Oregon State, K-State, Cal, and Nebraska. So we have some specific examples, but not all these are going to apply perfectly to you guys. So we encourage you to kind of toy around with some of these ideas and make sure it's going to work for your local chapter. That's what we want at the end of the day. And we did start a little bit late, but there shouldn't be much more than an hour. There will be time for some questions intermittently, but feel free if you're available in about an hour and you want to just keep hanging out and talking with the 4 of us, more than willing to. We're going to gladly answer any questions you have. So, going to pass it on to Justin.
all right. So just to kind of, before we get into the meat of everything, we want to have a little bit of a discussion. Just asking y'all, what was your experience like coming into your office? Did you have a good transition, bad transition? For me, for example, when I I was recruitment chair, and then when I transitioned to be venerable dean, my predecessor kind of stopped doing his job around October. So I was picking up his slack a little bit. And then once officially elections happened and we switched, I had to I later had to expel him. So I had to kind of teach myself everything, relearn Omega-Phi without anybody helping me, passing the torch. So it was a bit of it was not a good time. So after that, I try to make sure to transition well. Does anybody else have any stories I'd like to share? Times good things that happen with transitions, bad things. Don't see many hands. That's all
I
right.
can
Oh,
share.
thank
I
you,
can
Caleb.
share. Yeah. My transition was kind of different because just the way things are going with our chapter. There's a lot of like external factors to talk about, but I think what really helped with my transition was not only like having several meetings with our entire exec board went to Officer Summit. And I think having that experience as like the entire exec board together so we can all transition together and not just like in my position alone kind of helped also like smooth the transition for myself as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Caleb.
No, I couldn't agree more. No, I think I think the Officer Summit was like huge. That was like my first big exposure to like leadership in Acacia at that kind of level. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Anybody else want to share? Jace?
You guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm junior dean right now over at OSU Acacia. I had a kind of similar thing to you, Justin. My officer, predecessor, he kind of stopped doing his position like towards like fall term, so I kind of just had to pick up the slack and kind of figure out some things on my own, kind of a thing. And also, he made a really good like officer manual, which is really good. So I was able to pick up off that, and that really helped me personally. So even though like he wasn't awesome, like reaching out to me, like giving me a helping hand, going into my position, the officer manual helped me a lot. So I would say like people definitely like work on officer manuals, and that would help a lot, like transitioning as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jace, for sharing. I think officer manuals are something we're really going to touch on in this town hall. So thank you for bringing it up. Anybody else want to share?
I wanted to really quickly touch on Nolan's comment. For those I can't see, when I was in for secretary, it was a very poor transition, but for when I entered senior dean, it was great. I was kind of shadowing him for a bit, and then we simply went down to a chair within the committee I run, so it was easy to get a point of contact. No, I think that's like a perfect example, and we'll definitely touch on it here later in the presentation of kind of knowing when to scale back a little bit and kind of scale with your chapter and your ability to kind of properly run your chapters. No, I think that's a really perfect example of active leadership and a good transition.
Yeah, so on that note, go ahead and move on to the next slide here. Just giving an overview of officer transitions, what we're going to be talking about, like what is an officer transition? What does it really entail? So, typically when you have your elections for all, I believe all of our chapters except Carleton, everyone usually is going to be electing people early to mid-November, which is, I think, a good timeline to have. You want to get people elected, but what happens after elections, right? You don't want to just have dead time between getting elected for office and then the term actually starting on January 1st. I know for a lot of y'all, you're outgoing execs, the year's winding down, you got finals, but like honestly, probably the most important thing you can do as an outgoing exec is spend that last bit of time in the school year to just help transition your incoming officers so they have all the tools necessary to succeed in their term. So some of the things we'll be talking about in this section is reviewing our transition guide. There is a officer transition gold book that's listed on the website. We have a slide at the end with a bunch of different links for resources that I highly recommend y'all check out. So we'll be touching on that a lot throughout the presentation, but also officer manuals, that would be the gold books that we provide on the website as well, but also local manuals. Like Jace mentioned, it's important to have your own documentation because not every campus is the same, not every chapter is the same. So there's little nuances that you want to cover. Just provide a guide for the incoming guy. And important with that is handing off the materials. We'll touch on it a bit more, but that's should be a bit more than just here's all the docs, good luck. You want to kind of go through everything with the incoming officer within reason. You don't need to go line by line, but you as an outgoing officer know what is really key, what you probably couldn't operate without knowing. So make sure that you give the guys the right information and encourage them to, explore the manual. And then just generally best practices. Johnny will be talking about best practices for transitions kind of broadly, but really delineating the difference between transitions and training. So with that, I'll pass it off to Johnny.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. So before I start, I just want to, I love doing this. Can everyone put just in their name, like rename yourself so you have your chapter as part of your name? That'd be great. Yeah, so like you said, I'm going to be kind of talking about transitions versus training. So in this town hall, we're talking about officer transitions. We use that term broadly to describe the process of transferring power from the old exec board to the new exec board. But I'm going to talk about why it can be broken down into two parts. Transitions is a really transactional process. You're just transferring any info and materials like to the next guy. So it could be like manuals, it could be a timeline. It's really simple. The training is the more in-depth part that I think a lot of chapters aren't doing that effectively, and I would love to see more of it personally. Training can be like briefings for the new officers done by the old officers. So it's probably going to be a lot of one-on-one conversations. It could be at the officer retreats. It's just sharing personal experiences, the goods, the bads, and getting kind of more personal with that transfer of knowledge, that transfer experience as the power is transferred. So both are really necessary to set up the future leadership. The transition, the materials that you give are important to allow them to refer back to from time to time. And a lot of them can be like flat out guides, like a tutorial on how to do that position if you have a really good manual. But the training is the essential part that actually allows the new guys to have questions. So going into transition best practices, you're going to, on the next slide, please, write a list of all of your responsibilities that you as an officer have taken on this year. So just, kind of brainstorm, sit around for a while. If you're a president, I really encourage you to take an exec board meeting, take 30 minutes to do all of the. I guess my phone didn't want to participate. Anyway, where was I? Create a timeline. Y'all hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So create a timeline of important events and deadlines that are happening. You're going to want a full year chapter calendar would really help it out. That was tough. Sorry. So yeah, you're going to create create a timeline of all the important events that are going on so that you can, if you have like a chapter calendar, it really helps to create this timeline. You can refer back to it on anything that, like Founders Day is a really good one. So you could go back to this calendar and see that, yeah, all right, Founders Day is right here. We can't have any other events around that. And I mean, hey, it says right here in the timeline. I can just read it like a book. Can't do any socials that weekend. Can't have formal that weekend. That's what your junior dean will be saying, right? You can also evaluate your own performance as an officer. How did the year go? What lessons did you learn? What things went really well for you? And what can you tell the next guys about like your experience that would really help them? In the gold book, there's a really effective there's a worksheet that you can just fill out. There's one pre-made that you can do so you don't have to think about it kind of like it gives you some mind joggers on what to write about. And lastly, write down relevant contact information. So that could be your chapter coach, Justin and I. It could be the Greek office staff that maybe you have like a liaison with the university. It'll be your chapter advisor, alumni board president, anything that they would need to do their job effectively. So, going on to the next slide, what I really love to talk about is the training. So, first, we recommend planning and executing an officer retreat, and we'll get into that more later. At the officer retreat, you're going to have thorough conversations about the position. You really need to have these one-on-one discussions between the old and new officer on a lot of the transition material, but it really gives the new officer an opportunity to ask questions that they may have had. And when they ask these questions and they're talking about their goals, make sure that you're supporting them through that and that you're just kind of telling them how they can make their vision a reality. What are some things that could really help them follow through on that? And then, after all of this, continue to be an advisor through the year. They're likely going to keep asking you questions, and you should be there to answer for them and to support them. It's really messed up if you just say, all right, here you go, good luck, and you just move on with your life as if nothing, like none of what you did in the last year mattered at all. What you did does matter, and they may have questions for you, so you should support them through that. Help a brother out. Um, and from my experience, it only lasts like maybe 3 or 4 months where they'll keep talking to you, but just make sure that you're there for them through that spring. That's all I got. So I'll send it back over to Matt.
Yeah. Here we just got to kind of like in order milestones, more or less summing up what Johnny just said. So for you outgoing guys, step one, between now and when you do your transitions, make sure you're updating your transition guide, your manual, your materials. If you don't have a transition guide, start making one. Gold books, again, have a great skeleton for that. Use the gold books, but also make sure you're adding some more local knowledge because that's what's going to keep the transition guide really good. And as far as materials go, that can look like a lot of different things. It really depends on the position, but I highly recommend you just make sure that they're in a safe place when you are handing over the torch. Restock and anything you might have, maybe like security bands for like parties. I don't know. Materials really looks like a lot of different things depending on the position. And then 2 and 3 are, again, we're going to really emphasize these, not because they're the most important, but I think they're the least done as far as our good chapters may not be doing this, which is create an officer timeline and please reflect on your term. That's going to be really important when you are doing the transition. Once the transition is done, kind of in between 3 and 4, organize and attend your officer retreat for you outgoing guys. And again, do not abandon the new team. Be a resource for them for the next, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever it takes. Then for you new guys, what your to-do list is going to look like is reviewing again your transition guide manual, reviewing the timeline, start to figure out what your goals are. We highly recommend setting SMART goals. They're a great way to just kind of like, keep your goals organized and attainable, and attend your officer retreat, attend the officer summit if possible, and try to meet with your chapter advisor, chapter coach to talk through your goals. They're going to give you a good third-party idea of what's feasible, what can you do, and help give you some different perspective on how to achieve them. And then again, collaborate with the old team. A lot of people like to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes you want to prove yourself, and so you may not always listen to the old guys, but they typically got some good wisdom. So I highly recommend just keep them in the back of your mind. When you're doing your actual transition and training, find a time to sit down together. All right. This should not be hey, here's the documents, read the transition guide on your own. No, walk through it together, step by step, view the manual, view the timeline, and then physically hand off the materials. For you outgoing officers, I really recommend you kind of open up about your personal reflection to the incoming guy, explain what went well, what you wish you could have done. Like, don't be afraid to get vulnerable because you're going to give them the most honest, brutal truth about being a junior dean or being a senior dean or whatever your position is. And for you incoming guys, if you can prepare some goals before you do the transition, highly recommend sharing them with the outgoing officer, and then kind of being able to work together to make sure that the goals are logical and achievable. And then once you do that, refine your kind of goals and discussion points and be ready to take those to the officer retreat, which we're going to explain right now. So yeah, why the hell do officer retreats matter? Great question. Being an officer can sometimes be very stressful, depending on, the state of the chapter and the workload of the position. It's not always smooth sailing, and a good executive team is going to need to be able to work together and support each other. And so the goal of the officer retreats is basically essentially a brotherhood event for the executive board and get you guys all on the same page, get some goal alignment. And what I mean by goal alignment is making sure you all are identifying what is the goal of the chapter and what is the goal of the executive board, and making sure that when you are making decisions, 4 or 5 months down the line, are they aligning with the goals that we had set during the officer retreat? And that's going to keep you guys kind of steered straight, which is going to be really important. You don't want to lose your way, halfway through, lose motivation and direction as an executive team. So part of this is to keep you guys centered. And again, strengthening the ties of friendship. You need some personal intimacy. The guys that are going to be elected in the next couple weeks probably aren't the best of friends right now, but we want to change that. By the end of your time on the executive board, good chances you guys are all going to be really tight. But if we can really strengthen that brotherhood right now, you guys are going to do a whole lot better at the turn of the year. So that's the main idea with that. Justin, you want to flip to the next one? Real brief overview. After you've done your officer training and officer transition, everyone's kind of caught up with what the position looks like. That's when you move into the officer retreat. And then, if you can, go to the officer summit too. So discussion topics we're going to be going over during your officer retreats, planning out the entire year if possible, establishing goals, again, as I said, for the chapter and the executive board, and then individual goals for each position, and which we'll dive into in more detail now.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, this is something that I'm really excited to talk about because it's something that I think K-State does a really good job of that I want to see more chapters do because it's honestly it's probably the most fun part of officer transitions is the retreat. So the main thing is obviously attendees. So we typically have a more like okay, so we encourage the outgoing and the incoming to both be there. Obviously, the incoming being the most important ones there. Usually, our outgoing are there for just a little bit, just to kind of help guide the transitions, and they kind of go hands off and let them do their thing. But they could be there the whole time too. Just make sure you're not stepping on their toes and letting them, be in their own position while still being a guiding figure. You could have people from your J board, and you could have your chapter advisor. Those are also really good people to have. During your officer retreats, just to provide more context, more insight. And so you can all be on the same page. I think something that I've noticed that has happened in the past is when exec teams and officers just are completely different pages. They just did not go into it on the same page. So there's different kind of attitudes, different kind of expectations. That's a really, really good way to get off on the wrong foot, and you don't want that. So when should these take place? We were saying sometime after finals week. So our elections for our chapter are this Sunday. So typically, probably over winter break, they'll do some sort of retreat. Usually a 2-night, 2-day kind of thing. Whatever feels appropriate, whatever is respectful of people's times. And then make sure you just have time for a discussion. You need to have time to just talk. We've been talking about being vulnerable. It's not the officers are not meant to be a clique. They're not meant to be anything like that. But at the end of the day, you are the leading figures of your chapters, and you guys need to be strong as one to lead your chapter to success, and to kind of continue that trend of going on that. Take a retreat, go off campus. Oh my gosh, get out of your house, get out of your wherever, go do what you need to do somewhere else. So for example, we move in really early for the winter break. After winter break, we move in really early and it's literally like The Shining. We all go cabin fever crazy, in the house trying to talk about, our upcoming year and all that stuff. Bad. Don't do that. Just go. It's even, we go to a restaurant. We'll go to a restaurant. We'll go, get some food, have plenty of time to talk about non-exec things or non-officer things. Um, just get out of the house. Matt had a great example of the guys pooling some money, go find an Airbnb, go on a light road trip, nothing crazy. We're fortunate enough, one of our guys has a house near one of the lakes, his family, so we go to there and we go and we just kind of chill out by the lake and have a good time. Figure out what works best for you guys without causing more stress. Obviously, don't be, spending hundreds of dollars just to go on an officer retreat. Just spend a little bit if you're comfortable with it. If not, find something free. There's plenty of options. And I'm sure lots of guys here have great ideas. But those are kind of some of the best practices. And we have a few more on the next slide. So planning and organization. Absolutely go into your retreat with a plan, or else it's going to just be like 48 hours of goofing off and chilling out, which is awesome. But that's more of a brotherhood event than it is an officer retreat. At the end of the day, you are here to talk about, your budgets, talking about your plans for the term that you're going to go into. And oftentimes we find that going into the spring semester as your first term or your first semester of your term, it could be brutal. It could be really rough. So you really want to take the time to organize everything, discuss logistics, figure out who's going to talk about what, who's going to lead what. Make sure your location has Wi-Fi. That's a really good one. If you're going to go somewhere, make sure you have the capabilities to do the things you want to do. Like I know all of our stuff is on Google Drive. If we went to a place without internet or no access to Google Drive, there would be no reason for us to go. So also maybe consider getting physical documents. That's always a good thing. You can mark them up as you go. So always have a backup plan. Just be sure of that. And then schedule. This kind of ties into what we just talked about. Make sure you have a schedule. Make sure you know kind of what you're talking about, but also make time for fun, make time for good discussion. Matt will talk about discussion topics here in just a second, but just make sure that you lay it all out there, kind of gauge from the old team what they wish they would have talked about beforehand, but also bring the stuff that you wish you want to know as you're going into your new term, into your new job. So I'll pass it off to Matt. Matt's got some really good discussion topics for kind of what to talk about during these retreats.
Yeah, so during your kind of half-day discussion, this is what we would recommend to cover. Now, if you really want to dive into the details and all of these things, it could take you a good 4, 5, 6 hours, which can really put a strain on everybody's brain and focus. And so we recommend throwing in a lunch break, spacing out as much as you can, and try to prioritize the most important things to be discussed maybe first or second, and then the less important things kind of towards the tail end. So what we have shown here is not by no means an order of like a recommended order of discussion. But it's just, if anything, maybe put scheduling last. But all this can be really important stuff. So I'll just jump right into it. When you're creating a schedule, your focus, if you can, try to schedule out a whole year, but at least focus on the spring semester. What I've seen in my own chapter, as well as going to summits and ALAs and seeing other chapters, is that a lot of you incoming guys are going to be very energetic. You're not going to be burnt out, and you're going to want to do a whole bunch of stuff, which is great. And I love the enthusiasm. However, if there's not enough coordination between you guys, what often happens is we overbook and we don't load manage, and then it becomes a slog, and things aren't as fun as they could be. So when you're making your schedule for the year, list your key events first. What are your keystone things? What must you do? So figure out, when is induction? When is initiation? When is recruitment going to happen? For spring, when's Founders Day? I mean, we all kind of know when Founders Day is. When's our Founders Day event? So put the big stuff first, and then start to fill your extra time with the fun stuff. Okay, looks like this weekend's open. We can do a couple socials, or we can do a brotherhood, or this would be a good time for a sorority philanthropy event. So the idea with this is to build your calendar together, as opposed to separately, and then coming together at the beginning of the year and realizing you guys kind of shot yourself in the foot. So again, don't overcommit, because that can be, as I like to say, a drive killer for morale and motivation. If you have time, try to put in some the keystone events for fall. You probably will know when school's going to start. Put that date in the calendar if you can. You'll probably know when induction might be, initiation, a general idea. When's parents' weekend at at your campus? When's homecoming? Those are dates that you want to keep in mind. So if you can put them in early, put them in early. It always helps. Outline goals for both the chapter and the officers. This is kind of what we talked about during the transitions. Everyone should be talking about what they want to accomplish. This is your time to kind of come together and have your own ideas for what you want to personally accomplish. And then how does that relate to the overarching kind of light at the end of the tunnel for your chapter? So I recommend going through member by member, just kind of talking about, what you want to do, write it down on a shared document and something that you can refer to in the future. Something you can also do, assess the outgoing executive board's performance. This is kind of for the outgoing guys to discuss what they learned and their reflection. Again, it all circles back to transitions, which is why they're so damn important. And yeah, your goal with this conversation is take what the outgoing guys did and or didn't do, and then pivot it to how do these relate to the goals for the new guys, if that makes sense. I feel like I didn't word that as best I could, but anyways, feel free to assess the structure of the executive board. I'm going to let Justin get into this later, but this is something that I recommend all chapters do, especially as you grow and shrink, your dynamics kind of change. So that's all I'll say on that. Big one right here, go to the fraternity. Go to fraternity can really apply to a lot of things, but it is really just like what is going well for the chapter and what's not going well. It's a review of your culture. This is something that not everybody thinks about talking about as an executive board. It's often just like logistics for events. You guys should be talking about like how your guys are doing. That's really important. What do you enjoy about being in Acacian? What do you wish was better? I mean, what is the ideal member? What is the perfect member? Even though they don't exist, what's the theoretical perfect member? What's the average member? Try to have these kind of open discussions with your previous leaders and your future leaders, and try to get a consensus for this sort of culture. And if you know what your culture is, what defines your culture, you're going to be able to kind of really just like elevate your goals as a chapter, if that makes sense. And it's going to be a lot more easy to accomplish things if you know your culture and you can kind of work around that. And just a friendly reminder, and just especially for you incoming officers, being an executive board member isn't always easy. Everyone's dealing with shit. You're going to have to pick up each other's slack at times. But the biggest thing is that you're managing a large group of 20-year-old boys. We're not men at times. We're immature as hell. So nothing's ever going to go perfect. And I think coming into your tenure as an officer, knowing that nothing's going to ever be perfect, will help you kind of just take the stress off sometimes. Last thing, arguably the most important thing, this is a bonding experience. All right. You guys want to become a team. Like, you want to be a really cohesive team when you're done with your officer transition. So have some fun. It's a good time. Justin?
Sorry, I have two screens here, moving all over the place. So, breaking down officer organization a little bit more, like Matt had said, officer structure, I think, is really important to review at the end of your term. What do I mean by this? What I mean, it's, for one, you want to assess the performance of the executive board, like as how you did over the course of the year. Because remember that the guy who you were stepping into the role in January or whenever you started, and then who you are at the end, very different people, oftentimes. You've grown a lot, you've learned a lot. And I know, there's a tendency at times for us older members, we do our exec position. We think we've gained a lot of knowledge and experience, and kind of forget that, just like 8-9 months ago, we were coming into the job, maybe not knowing what the hell we're doing, right? So give your incoming guys that grace. Remember that they have that, they got a lot of ideas. They haven't been knocked down by reality as hard in executing some of those. So make sure that you assess and just like really consider what worked and what didn't work And in doing that, a key thing is going to be assessing the actual structure of your executive board. Just because you have a board that is, I mean, outside of your core 7, I'd say, I know a lot of chapters have a lot of chair positions. They might also add on a few guys to the exec board. And just because it's been done this way for forever, or it's what we did this past year, doesn't mean it needs to be the same moving into the next term. I'd say a critical part of your self-assessment, which forgot to mention, you can, in the Officer Transition Gold Book, there is a guide for that, a template. I'd highly recommend checking that out if you're not really sure how to like assess yourselves in a productive way. But back to structure. So, there's critical things that we as an organization need to do, right? Like we need to have a founders day. We need to do social events. We need to do philanthropy events. We need to recruit new members. We need to educate those new members, right? And maybe at specific campuses, it's like we as a Greek organization, we have to participate in a Greek week, or we have to make a homecoming float. So kind of touching on Johnny's point before, like make it a list of everything that you need to do as a chapter, and look at your exec board, use your exec board to fill each of these roles. Sometimes, chapters will create a chair position for a specific need that maybe doesn't really have a use later down the line. We have, for instance, at Cal, I think we've created at times additional social chairs underneath the junior dean, and those have served a great purpose. Having a brotherhood chair, I think, is an excellent thing because you're prioritizing brotherhood, giving somebody the authoritative power to plan those events. So, but at the same time, if your chapter maybe isn't as big anymore, or your needs have changed, it's important to restructure. It's okay to downsize your exec board, or downsize your leadership team. You guys, these are your chapters. You can run them all, for the most part, how you see fit. So if the structure or the bureaucracy of your exec board is making it really difficult in your prior experience for the outgoing guys, help out your new guys and change things up. That's totally, within your power to do so. And this last point on third-party relationships, this is kind of to say, I mean, we touched on it before, but consider all the different external people you might have relationships with. So, for instance, if you do your initiations at a Masonic lodge, make sure that you have that contact information down, and that you delegate who's going to be responsible for contacting that person. Practical example I can think of at Cal, where earlier on when we were still figuring our stuff out, the senior dean prior had been the guy contacting the lodge. We didn't really think about it the following semester when we transitioned, and kind of, it was a thing of like, well, you were supposed to do this. You're the senior dean. And it's like, well, I didn't know that. I didn't even know we had to contact the guy, right? So you don't want to have these, awkward moments that are going to screw you up where, well, because we didn't think about the FSL advisor, or we didn't think about the, trading information with other Greek houses or with the lodge, that all of a sudden this relationship that you spent a year or multiple years developing is a bit crippled because we didn't consider those third-party relationships and delegate who is responsible. And it doesn't always need to be the same. The important thing is that you have that need fulfilled. Moving on to this next slide to kind of go over what a chapter organization can look like. This is a chart that's in most of the gold books. As you can see, the Venerable Dean is kind of overseeing all operations. And as a Venerable Dean, if you're not already learned this lesson by experience for the outgoing guys, but for any prospective guys maybe wanting to run in the future, your job as VD is not to do everything. It's to make sure that everything is happening. You're facilitating, you're working with your officers, helping them to get their job done, not just doing it for them. And that's, same goes for each of the exec positions with your chair positions. You want to empower your brothers to do their job, do the tasks that are set out, and not like, don't fall into the habit of picking up slack just and not holding people accountable. But looking at this chart, I highly recommend that all of you guys do this. When you have your retreat or whenever you do your transitions as a whole team, look at your leadership structure, and whether following this example or not, you can put each of the responsibilities you have and the needs of your chapter under each position. Make sure that you're covering visually all the areas you need to cover as a chapter, as an exec team for your chapter. So doesn't need to exactly be this, but I really highly recommend that this is as you are doing these self-assessments of the exec board and assessing the structure of the exec board, actually make a chart and plot it out and use it as you go to the next year. So with that, I did want to mention one last thing real quick. For officer retreats, if finances are a constraint, talk to your alumni, because an event like that is educational. I believe would be educational. So I think you could arguably use AFF chapter funds for such things. If not, local alums, your alumni, while they might be always down to help out and donate money for social things that we might want help with, I think a lot of alumni like to see us actually using our time to run the organization well and develop ourselves professionally. So this is something that I'm sure, asking alumni to help support an officer retreat that ensures a year of well-organized chapter activities is going to be a pretty good sell. But yeah, so with that, that's pretty much the meat of our presentation, but we're going to kind of go just really quickly, transition topics by office, starting with the Venerable Dean. And I'll pass it off to Benjamin Draconi to touch on this a little bit.
Yeah, so one quick note on that org chart that was listed before. Your chapter definitely should have an org chart of some type. This is one that is based on, a couple of chapters and also just a logical order for things. But if your chapter develops a different, org chart, if you reach out to us, I'm happy to work with you to make a version that looks like this, but has the positions that report to other positions, for your chapter. So that's something that we can do for you, and then you'd be able to integrate it into your pledge manual and stuff like that. So now to go to transition topics for Venerable Deans. One thing I want to point out with Venerable Deans is that I think a lot of people think of it like the quarterback. However, I would actually say that this is more of the head coach, because a quarterback is on the field throwing the passes and things like that. But if, as Venerable Dean, you are just doing all of the work, you're doing it wrong. You need to be kind of on the sidelines in a sense, making sure that all of the positions are doing their job. So, you can change that metaphor a little if you really want to, but that's the way I think of it. Now, some things that you do work on the field itself is, you do run the chapter officer meetings, maintaining the relations with the university, IFC, with us as the headquarters, and also with your housing corporation if you are housed, definitely with your alumni board if you are or aren't housed. Some things to make sure that you're aware of are the incident action plan and laws of Acacia. Laws of Acacia are long, I know, but refer to it whenever you have a question, because there may, especially when it relates to the operations of the chapter, how to expel a member. It is detailed very clearly in the laws of Acacia. And with all of this stuff, whenever you have a question or you're doing something for the first time, reach out to us, reach out to your chapter coach, because we can help save you time getting it done. Instead of you having to read through the laws of Acacia, you can just contact us and say, hey, we have to expel a member. How do I do that properly? We're happy to save you the time of reading through the laws of Acacia to say, hey, this is where it is, and we'll talk you through it. That's our goal, is not to make you spend more time talking with us, but by spending, 10, 15 minutes talking with us, we can save you an hour or 2 hours of your own personal time. So one thing I really do want to point out for Venerable Dean is that you have to lead by example. If you do something, it is acceptable for every other member in the chapter to do that. So the most important thing that you can do as Venerable Dean is to serve as an example of the ideal occasion. Whenever you're making a decision, lead from your values, lead from what is the right thing to do, not the easy thing to do. if you do that one thing, you're going to do a great job. And for everything else, reach out to us. We're happy to help.
I gotta follow that. Damn. All right, well, we're gonna dive into some transition topics for the senior deans. As you kind of saw in the officer organization flowchart, senior dean can really be a jack of all trades, and can cover a lot of different bases, depending on the chapter. This slide is mostly going to cover just new member education and initiation. But there will be some stuff about awards and scholarship and other things later on down the line, if that applies to you. But the biggest thing is just how are you going to run your new member education? How are you going to be a leader for your pledge or your new member classes? And how do you kind of manage them effectively? I think those are really the biggest things they training for the transition, as a, and then versus some more physical like transition is, how are you going to use the Pythagoras? What does your new member guide look like? What does the manual look like? How you can use potential new member quizzes and tests, what those could potentially look like. Another thing that sometimes slips under the radar is reporting to headquarters. So reporting new members through Omegafy and initiation reports often can be tricky for people new to it. How do you get tightrope done on time and efficiently? And then things like ordering ritual regalia, that there's a link on the headquarters website. I believe we put it in the very end if that's something that you need to look into. And then also, at least at the Oregon State chapter, the senior dean is not necessarily completely in charge of ritual, but kind of helps spearhead it. And so that's where, again, training can come in, some firsthand experience with the ritual and how to run it, especially second degree, extremely important. So highly recommend.
All right, moving on to junior dean. Now I know a lot of chapters tend to have they'll have a philanthropy chair and probably a brotherhood chair, so social chair. But just kind of broadly speaking in all of these topics, social, you want to talk about things like if you have dances. I don't know if many chapters, I don't know if you guys actually do house dances. I never did one, but that sounds kind of fun. Brotherhood events, super important. I mean, this is, in my opinion, like the cornerstone of your chapter. If you're not doing brotherhood events, or if you're not having events where you as a brotherhood can bond, a lot of problems will stem from that. Though we are like, young men, we really are like boys, like Matt is saying. I have seen so many times in my own chapter, other chapters, the pettiest, stupidest things get in the way of effective brotherhood because guys just lack a level of intimacy that you get from doing brotherhoods. And this, having fun events is key, but I'd also say having times to be sort of vulnerable with each other, having brotherhood talks where you can just, talk about your day, talk about life, just share with what's going on in your life with your brothers. It's super important, and having that basis, that strong brotherhood, is going to be critical to your success as an organization. Some other stuff like Founders Day, Family Weekend, Homecoming. Carleton, I know, is planning a dad's weekend. Seems like it's going to be a lot of fun. It's also great for membership retention and recruitment. Always work on your parents, having events that are going to be palatable and to parents, and invite them to stuff. Like a parent who's a lot of guys, their dues are getting paid by their parents. Wouldn't hurt to have some events that cater to them specifically. Risk management, making sure that the incident plan, but also the risk management policies. You're keeping alcohol in the house to events under 15%. Just making sure you know all of that, a Good Samaritan policy. And registering your events with whoever the relevant parties are in your campus, your city, the fire department, University IFC, making sure you have sound permits. I know a lot of people kind of, the junior dean becomes like, your chief partier of the house, but that's really not what the junior dean is. You want you to have fun, you want to have a good time, but as junior dean, you are organizing these social events, and whatever type it is, especially if it's something that has alcohol involved, we have to be on top of our game. We got to look out for our guests, making sure that we're following the rules and that we are doing everything that we can to ensure the event goes smoothly for your own sake and for the chapter's sake. One of the best things that I think our chapters what a consistent thing that I love hearing at campuses is that Acacia is a place where people are saying Acacia is a place where I feel safe partying. The brothers are really, respectful. They're good hosts. That's the kind of reputation you want on campus, and the junior dean is the person who's really going to be spearheading that. Now, in terms of philanthropy, really, really encourage you guys to be doing some, philanthropy in any form you feel comfortable as a chapter, but at a base, if you don't have any ideas, 7 days of service in spring and Acacia Claws in winter, both great activities. You can choose what you're doing it for, but a common thing I've seen is like Acacia Claws doing Toys for Tots or raising money for Shriners Children's Hospital, 7 days of service. There's, you could do acts of service in your community, get involved with local organizations. And I'd say for philanthropy, it's really critical. I won't go over all of them, but it's critical to get involved with the community around you. As our fraternity seeks to do, being an active part of the community in which we reside, it's important to not only just do stuff yourselves, but get involved with the other philanthropic orbs on campus and also in the city. It's just a great way to get your name out there, and it doesn't hurt to have goodwill with the university because you're taking care of the community.
Awesome. Yeah. No, recruitment, it's my bread and butter. I could talk about it for hours. I guarantee there'll probably be a recruitment town hall in the near future. I won't take too much more time. But transitioning your recruitment chairs is crucial for the survival of your house. If you don't transition your recruitment chairs, you're gonna have bad recruitment. It's just a fact. So a lot of this is very subjective. Obviously, the way that every chapter recruits is pretty different. But really just talk about value-based recruiting, the bidding process, best practices. The best thing you can do is just have your recruitment chairs all throughout their years while they're in the chapter constantly be involved with the process because it is a daunting task. I would not have done a good job recruiting if the recruitment chair before me did not sit me down and really give it to me straight and tell me kind of what's going on and be there for me my lowest moments and my highest moments. And then when I took over Venerable Dean, my top priority was pretty much recruitment, was making sure they're good. So just constantly keep on top of that. Use of Chapter Builder. I'm sure you guys have heard it a lot, but if you're not using Chapter Builder, what are you doing? You got to use it. Use it to however you want, use it as little or as much as you want, but it is a undoubtedly great tool. Kind of talk about what summer recruitment looks like. I think a lot of chapters do it differently. So just really kind of understand what your kind of low periods and high periods look like and how you tackle those. Super, super crucial. Leadership scholarship. Once again, if your chapter is not doing a scholarship, I strongly consider you look into it. It is such a good recruitment tactic. I'm not going to sit here and be like, you're guaranteed your entire pledge class through a scholarship. No, not at all. But it is a great introduction. It looks really great for your reputation. We really promote ourselves as being an academic forward fraternity. So when you can tell parents, you can tell PNMs that, hey, like we have a scholarship, huge, awesome. And I think the big thing there is how you approach the scholarship. If you approach them as, hi, we're a fraternity, we want to give you money, that's not as effective as we are a student organization looking for students who represent leadership. That's a lot more appealing and a lot more understanding, and it's so crucial. There's a lot of things you can do. For us, our scholarship takes place in February, and our officer transitions are in December. So it is a quick turnaround, and we're promoting it all throughout the fall semester. So really make sure that transition of the scholarship, if that is something you guys focus on, that's got to stay crucial. It's got to stay consistent. And you got to just keep it flowing. 365 recruiting, kind of what I talked about with summer recruitment. Always be recruiting. Always be recruiting. It is crucial, even if you're not exactly, signing guys to the house. Still be spreading the word of Acacia. Still be getting guys interested. Kind of builds a little bit of tension. If you're like, yeah, no, we'd love to recruit you, but we're gonna have to wait until so and so. It's only happened to me one time, but it was a really awesome experience to be like, sorry, bro, you're on the wait list. That was awesome. So be talking about 365 recruitment, say what it looks like. One-on-one recruiting, that's a big one. That's kind of, I think, Acacia's bread and butter is that one-on-one recruiting. And it's not mentioned on here, but make sure that the recruitment chairs know that they're not alone, and make sure that everyone knows that recruitment is an all-house process. Top priority of that recruitment is an all-house effort. So just make sure that your recruitment chairs know that.
Turning around to risk management, I'll keep this pretty brief because we're starting to run out of time here. But it's kind of the umbrella that you should understand with risk management and the transition is basically their relationship with especially the social chair, the junior dean, as well as the venerable dean, how they kind of work in tandem as along the lines of risk management. So make sure that the incoming risk manager is aware of your local chapter risk management policy, and they know that kind of front to back. And as well, during your transition and your training, start to talk about, hey, can we make improvements on this? What's in some way, shape, or form? As well, be aware of the Acacia headquarters risk management policy. Also throw in, honestly, laws of Acacia. Wouldn't be bad to know a few stuff in there too. So if incoming guys have time, highly recommend you read through that. As I said, partnering with the junior dean, the social chair, making sure we're getting sound permits, we're registering events with the fire department if needed, or the university or IFC. That's all really important stuff. Staying safe and staying out of harm's way. Incident action plan, good medical good Samaritan policy, really important. If you're a house chapter, what's the fire safety plan? Your risk manager should be living in the house, and so I would think that would be applying. And another thing that is often kind of not considered, risk doesn't only happen at parties. Risk can happen really at any point in time. If it's a recruitment event, if it's a philanthropy event, if you need a waiver of some kind, headquarters does provide that, and so I highly recommend looking into that for anyone who's an incoming risk manager.
Yeah, so briefly touching on just treasurer and secretary. These are very important, but I'll try to keep it brief. With treasurer, you guys can read the slide, you know what it says here, but I just want to really emphasize with treasurer, it's critical to, this is probably one of the most important transition, like, not that anything is not important to transition, but you really got to make sure we do this well because, all it takes is one semester of accumulating debt to really put it's like sticking a stick in your, bicycle wheel. It's not going to be a fun time when headquarters is knocking on your door saying you got 10K in debt. Like, having good financial structure is critical to your chapter success and health. I'd also say for the treasurer, definitely look into having some sort of just some extra checks and balances. I think some chapters will have it so that like financial transactions have to be approved by 2 people. Typically, I'd say, treasurer, venerable dean, but however works best for you. Just the unfortunate reality is, we're all good brothers, but sometimes some guys join and they see a bunch of money in an account and they think I'm going to spend it all on myself. It's the unfortunate reality. I've seen it happen. I've had to expel my own treasurer because he was embezzling funds. So it's not a fun time, and it can be easily prevented if we have some proper checks and balances for actually managing the funds. And having plans for dues, as the thing I've seen at some chapters is, there's discounts for early dues payment, making it so that it's valuable for members to pay early. I know a difficult thing for guys is if you guys have members who are delinquent in paying, it's a pain. If it's your brother and they're not paying, you don't want to be going to your brother asking him for money. But at the end of the day, we're all here, we're all paying, we're all contributing. So I'd say the treasurer, especially, if you need help, especially in these tougher conversations, talk to your venerable dean, talk to your rest of your exec board, talk to your chapter advisor. It's if it's an issue of somebody's not paying, you as a treasurer don't need to tackle that alone. This is a chapter matter. So make sure that you're asking for the proper help, whether it's from locally or from us at headquarters. For the secretary, super important, keeping publications and documentation in the house ordered. The biggest thing here I'd say is alumni publications, managing a newsletter. The alumni are going to be, if you communicate with them frequently and keep them in the loop, they can be a great resource to the chapter. It's important to keep the alumni informed so that they know what is going on. At the end of the day, these are older guys, but they're still your brothers. They want to see us having fun. They want to see you guys, doing the best that you can do. So important to keep them updated. And in terms of internal chapter structure, making sure that you have um, a good system for taking notes, a consistent system. It's really important to take good notes in exec meeting and good notes in chapter. Because if, let's say, ideally everyone is having a pretty organized chapter meeting / exec meeting, but I've been around, I've seen your guys' chapter meetings, exec meetings. It can be a bit of a mess, especially exec. So having having a secretary taking good notes, sifting through everything to really get the meat of what we're discussing is super important for actually being productive. And yeah, just keeping it can be annoying as secretary, you're doing a lot of checking of attendance and sorting the mail, whatever it is, but it's crucial. We really need to have the secretary is, I think, one of the unsung heroes of the chapter, kind of a position that is not looked upon super favorably, but it is critical. So make sure you transition your secretary as well. And last but not least,
All right, boys. So for the scholarship chair and house managers, if they're already in here, great. If not, please let them know. Some important transition topics here. I will actually be brief. Scholarship chairs are going to. You're going to want to know about. They need to know about this AFF scholarship because every single conclave and ALA, the AFF guys will stand up there and they'll be like, "We have so much money. Please take our money." And our chapters are just not taking it. So please make sure the next scholarship chairs know about these leadership scholarships. I promise you, it's the easiest money you will ever make. There was a guy. I was the chapter advisor at Washington State, right? And they had a member that literally just initiated, and he didn't have like a lot. Like the common misconception is that you have to have loads of like exec officer experience, and that's just not the case. He had just initiated and he got a scholarship. It was great. He was very happy. If you have any internal scholarship programs, make sure the next guy knows that. Scholarship dinners, events, talk about how to execute those. Study hours. Make sure that the system, whatever system your chapter has, if your GPA is high, if you have a bad GPA, maybe don't talk about it. But if you have a good overall GPA there, make sure the next scholarship chair knows essentially how to keep track of your study hours, how to run those types of things. And then make sure that they understand your chapter's bylaws on academic probation. For house manager, a lot of chapters will have some sort of work weekend or work day where you guys all come together and you do a lot of tasks. Make sure the next guy is really prepared for that. Make sure they're thinking about what sorts of projects they want to do for that. Make sure they understand, I guess, how to print a chore sheet, or whatever your system is. Make sure they understand it. Any phone numbers or like business services that may come to mind, give those on to the next guy. And then an important one that a lot of house managers don't anticipate is working with the house court board. It can be intimidating. House court board people tend to be pretty intense, pretty scary for a 20-year-old if they've never spoken to like a landlord before. So just kind of prepare them for those, what to bring to those meetings, how to conduct themselves. And that's it. The next slide is just talking about some officer resources. The second to last one there is the Transition Gold Book. Thank you, Matt, for throwing that in the chat. It's really helpful. It is pretty long, but it's broken out into sections. It's not like every single thing is critical. So just look for what you want in there. And of course, if you're one of my chapters, I can help you out with the best practices and reading through that. But that's all I've got. I hope you all stick around for this amazing last slide. Thank you.